Meanwhile, the UN said Friday it is investigating whether 3 chemical weapons attacks were carried out in Syria after the incident that sparked the U.S. threat of military action. In total, UN inspectors are now looking into 7 attacks in Syria, 3 in the north before the large attack in the suburbs of Damascus. That attack on August 21st killed 1,429 people, including 400 children, and set off a call for accountability. Now, despite calls for restraint then, it appears there were 3 more attacks in the Damascus suburbs. The UN inspectors are scheduled to finish their work on Monday. And in Syria Friday, car bombs exploded near a mosque north of the Syrian capital as worshipers emerged from Friday prayers, killing at least 30 people. In the civil war in Syria, now in its 3rd year, that has killed more than 110,000 people. On top of that, a lack of access to food, soaring prices, and a collapse in food production has left the children of Syria at risk of malnutrition, according to the humanitarian group Save the Children. Michael Klosson is Vice President of Policy and Humanitarian Response for Save the Children and joins us from Washington, D.C. Michael, thank you so much for taking a bit of time for us. We have been reporting on the plight of the Syrian refugees for months now. Can you describe their situation? And I imagine that it is indeed deteriorating.
I think it's a very tough circumstances that children within Syria face. And you mentioned 110,000 people that have perished over the 2+ years of this civil conflict. It also includes 7,000 children. And many of the parents feel that the children are not only getting caught in the crossfire, they're actually being targeted. So what we're seeing, and then we've brought this out in the report that we issued this week, is an increased risk of malnutrition and hunger for children. Overall, there's maybe 4 million children, 4 million people within Syria, half of whom are children, and they're facing great difficulty in getting enough nutritious food on the plate each day.
Can you sort of describe the conditions that the refugees, the displaced citizens, are living under?
Sure. So I was in Jordan the week before last, and I visited some of our activities in the refugee camp north of the capital city of Amman, as well as some refugees that were living within Amman itself. Let me put that to the side and instead first concentrate on kids within Syria itself. And Save the Children is working both with refugee families and children in neighboring countries. We're also working within Syria itself. And I think the challenge for getting a nutritious diet is sort of manifold. In the first instance, with the fighting going on, a lot of families are hunkering down in basements or homes, and it's very dangerous for them even to go outside. So there's lots of stories, and we bring this out in our report, of families who for several days, 3, 4, 5 days, they just have to stay inside, so they can't get out. And children are left to fend for themselves on very meager diets of, say, tea and a little bit of bread. When you're able to get out and maybe go to a shop and try to get some food, what we're finding is that there's not as much food on the shelves anymore because the agricultural production has been destroyed in the crossfire of a lot of the firing. So it's difficult to get out. When you get out, there's not as much food as there used to be. With scarce food, what families are also confronting is higher food prices. And then when you think of people's livelihoods, I mean, a lot of people now have lost their livelihood, so they're facing higher food prices with less assets. And so it's a very, very difficult circumstance. And that's conspiring to put increased pressure on children and families, and they're facing the prospect of increasing hunger and malnutrition.
And Michael, what about the aid pledge from the international community? The U.S. pledged earlier this year $60 million in aid to Syrian refugees, as well as many other countries. First of all, is that money being released to go to their aid, and is it getting to where it needs to be?
Well, I think this is probably the UN appeal for assistance for families inside Syria as well as in the neighboring countries is the largest in history. It was around $4.5 billion, and less than half of that has been mobilized so far. I have not been inside Syria. What I did see in Jordan is that aid is getting through. I mean, in this refugee camp in the north of Amman, which really has become the 5th largest city in Jordan, Zartari camp, the World Food Program and through Save the Children, we're feeding 130,000 people. And so aid is reaching people. We're able to provide some support for children. There's a certain amount of education that's taking place. There are some health services. So aid is getting through, but it needs to be scaled up. I mean, the work that's being done, the good news is that the people that are being reached are being well served. The problem is that not enough people are being reached.
And very, very briefly, the season is about to change. How much more dire does their situation get as we go into winter?
Right. So, I mean, I think we went through this last year. I mean, it's not too late to really start thinking about what kinds of clothes and things that families need to survive what can be quite a cold winter in that part of the world. So winterization and the need to mobilize funds to support families to face the winters. And it can be, for example, in the refugee camp north of Jordan, it's on a very sandy plain, no protection, no trees. It's going to be very, very cold at night. They need all of the help that they can get.
They certainly do. Michael Klosson, thank you so much for raising the awareness of this important situation.
You're welcome.
And this is Arise America.